When you are ready, Dr. Neff.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to another episode of Real Talk Family Life, building shatterproof families one brick at a time, brought to you by Faith Tabernacle in St. James, Trinidad, and a group of Caribbean evangelical ministers. I'd like you once more to reach out to your friends, family members, neighbors, church members, whomever you would like to invite to come and participate in this discussion. And we look forward to you hearing from our esteemed panel this evening. I am your host, Patricia Neff, for this evening, and our discussion topic is part 3 of preparing for the senior years. Preparing for the senior years. This is something that we all would have an opportunity to do. So we have an amazing panel here with us this evening. We have 3 members of our panel. 2 you're very familiar with, Dr. Bishop Garvin Garraway and Pastor Bertram Jones, are very familiar faces and contributors on this program. But we have a new panelist with us this evening, and we're excited to hear from Pastor Ann Diaz. So I'm going to ask the familiar faces, the familiar voices to first introduce themselves, and then we'll have Pastor Diaz to introduce herself to the audience this evening. Bishop Garraway.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm Bishop Gavin Garraway, and I have been pastoring for 36 years, ministering for 42 years, and been to about 40 countries in the world, traveled around ministering, sharing the gospel, and I'm married to somebody from the precious kingdom of Eswatini, holding South African citizenship. And I really enjoy talking about family life and resources and things like that. So it's an opportunity, good opportunity. And by the way, I'm 59 years old, so I'm just on the crest of this topic. So I'm excited to share and to learn, from my seniors and my folks around the same age as me, etc. So God bless you. Let's have an exciting time tonight. Praise God.
Thank you, Bishop Garraway. Pastor Jones?
Yes, well, I'm Bertram Jones, and thank you for the honor of calling me pastor, but I'm really an elder, which is a lay position, but no problem. I'm glad to be here, and I thank you all for the privilege of being on it. I am not, in terms of being qualified, I'm not a qualified a pastor. I'm a lay elder. I've been an elder for the past 35, 36 years. Most of the time I've been in the church, actually. I have a fair amount of experience in church and church matters. As my profession, I sell cars. We import cars and we sell, and we've been doing that for about 30 years. I was in the corporate world, but that didn't work out. I was in the corporate world for about 14, 17 years. That didn't work out, so I decided that I would that I was forced to really go on my own, and I've been on my own now from 1995 until now. I have my own business, well, a couple of businesses really, and I thank God for them. In terms of academia, I have a bachelor's in accounting, MBA from Heriot-Watt University, and a PhD from Walden University in management. And I'm currently now doing another doctorate because I have to do it, really, because I intend to do some preaching. So I really want to be qualified properly. I don't want to go there just a layman doing this thing. So I'm pursuing now a doctorate in ministry. The emphasis in it is expository preaching with the Grace College and Theological Seminary. I'm hoping that in the next 2 years I'll be finished. And that's it right now.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. See, I wasn't too off base, right? Just elevating you as you
thank you.
to earn that degree. Thank you so much. Pastor Diaz?
Sure. Good evening, and it's such a pleasure to be with you on this program tonight. I am the senior pastor at Victory Christian Outreach Church. That's in Arima. Our main headquarters would be in Belmont. I lectured, I was the coordinator for the mediation unit at the University of the West Indies and a lecturer there until I retired in 2022. So you see, I am really poised for this conversation tonight.
Yes.
I still lecture, and I'm the coordinator of their mediation, all of their trainings. I'm also a clinical therapist with my own business in Port of Spain, Trinidad. I do a lot of training throughout the Caribbean, the region, with all of the islands, Barbados, St. Vincent, Turks and Caicos, so I'm not going to go through all of that, but I am really happy that I am with you this afternoon, and I'm trusting that the areas that we're going to discuss, I will be able to contribute. I've designed numerous modules. I've trained in excess of 5,000 people, designed several programs in soft skills, in addition to retirement programs. So I'm thinking that this will be an area that I'm hoping that will benefit our listeners. So that's just me in a nutshell. Hey,
Well,
I am married with 4 kids to 1 husband. We have our first son died in 2023. So we have 3 kids left. Yeah.
so sorry for your loss. Pastor Diaz, that's no nutshell at all. You come fully equipped, fully prepared, fully ready to address this topic, and we are so appreciative of you being here with us today. So thank you. And you said one thing that reminded me dearly of my mom, who passed away a little over a year ago. She says she has 4 kids with 1 husband, and my mom used to say, I have 10 children with 1 husband. So that really endeared me when you said that. So thank you. All right, so let's dive into our topic for this evening. I just want to let you know what the objectives are for today. We have 2 of them. One is to help the audience recognize the importance of committing to consistently saving, investing wisely, and managing debts as we age, and planning how to plan for pensions or Social Security, and ensuring that estate planning, wills, and living trusts, and all those things are in place when you reach the stage and age of having to live through your retirement. So we've introduced ourselves, we know the objective, and I'm ready to pose the first question to our panel. And it's a simple question. When is the ideal time for someone to start preparing financially for retirement? And I am actually going to go to Pastor Diaz first on this one. When is the ideal time for someone to start preparing financially for retirement?
Actually, the ideal time for persons to start preparing is as soon as you got a job. You should start putting aside and saving. However, a lot of people, when you're that young, you don't think about these things. So we suggest by the age of 40, you should have been solid enough to start looking at how you're going to prepare for your retirement. One of the things, though, I want to add here is that quite often the major focus when we are preparing for retirement is generally financial. but we also need to think about the psychological effects of retirement that retirement would have to us. For example, we work, we leave home. If in Trinidad, I'm telling you, with the traffic, you leave here, like you leave your house about 6 in the morning, and you're not getting back until about 6 in the evening. That's about 12 hours you are away from your family. And we do that for years. Let's say we do it for 20 until we're 60 or until we're 65. It means that we have not had time to make our friends, our neighbors, which some of us don't know our neighbors. Some of us haven't got time to talk to them. And all of those things are important. And one of the things I say to people, when you start thinking about retirement, at least 5 years before you retire. Yes, we're thinking about the finance, and we should have had that going from age 40. But 5 years before you actually retire, you should start to reconnect with the people on your street, reconnect with the neighbors, reconnect with your family, and get to know them better, because we would not have known them. You realize you have to come back and stay with them and live with them for, well, now they would be in your face, in your space. So you have to know, reacclimatize with people. There may be a little, especially for extroverted people. Those that are introverts may not have a problem with, staying inside and so on, but the extroverts need to connect. Everybody, we need socialization, we need those social skills. And we should try to connect, because what happens to neighbors is that they don't know you, they haven't spoken to you, you've lost touch with them, you've lost touch with your family. And I have heard people come in for counseling after retirement, in that the connection with their families have been lost. So I don't want to say much more on that, but I'm saying that that is also an area that we really should consider when we're thinking about retirement, and start putting that in place at least 5 years before we are back home.
Love it, love it. Dr. Jones, what do you say?
First of all, I agree with everything Dr. Diaz said. In terms of when you should start preparing for retirement, when they did some reading on it, most people said, from the time you're in your 40s, some of them said from the time you start working, and I think that makes sense. From the time you start working, you should prepare for retirement. But the reality is, as was said earlier, when you start to work, retirement is far from you. It's only as you get older and very close to retirement is when many people start to think about retirement. But retirement is a very serious thing, because if you're accustomed getting $10 a week, this is just a hypothetical example. When you retire, you're probably going to get about half. So your standard of living is going to, unless you have something to buttress it, your standard of living is going to fall, and fall drastically. So that is something that should really be thought about while you are really earning income. My suggestion, though, but I'm thinking, when I give my experience, I'm thinking from a business person's point of view. But for a salaried person, I believe that person should try to ensure that, to keep their standard of living up, that they have something on the outside to do. When I say something on the outside, a side means of income. Because when you get less income, then obviously your standard is going to fall, your standard of living. So to buttress that, to ensure that you still can float, make sure you have something on the side that you can pull from regularly. And another thing, oh dear, it just slipped from me. But it's important, though, that when you must plan for your retirement, and ensure that oh yes, I got it back now. I was just there, we were for time. There are many people who, and I've discovered that over the years, there are many people who, they try to leave debt free. They plan for that, which is good. But there are many people who reach retirement age who are not debt free. Some of them have mortgages. Some of them have car loans, big loans, and that could be a problem. That is why it is necessary that as we are approaching retirement, that we should plan for retirement a long time before we reach retirement age. Because when you have debt and you're working for less money, that means that it's more than your standard of living is going to fall. It means you can create problems when you're home, big time. So, retirement is a very serious thing. And, surprisingly for me, it's only in recent times that I really started thinking about retirement. But it is very important. But for me, I like the biblical rule. If you look in the Bible, and this is a biblical-based program, I do not think that you'll find the word retirement in the Bible. As a matter of fact, let me bring an example. Levitical priests, I think you'll find that in Numbers 8, I think. They were supposed to start work at 25, and they were to retire at 50. You're just gonna work, ad infinitum as a priest. But even though they were supposed to retire at 50, they were not just put out to the grass. They were allowed to help and assist in the services of the sanctuary, but not lead out. So what that suggests to me is that we talk about retirement, but I believe that when you quote unquote retire, you should go into something else. In fact, you shouldn't just come home and sit down on the sofa, but ensure that you always have something to do. Keep that brain active. Not only the money, but to keep that brain active. All right. That's enough for me right now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Dr. Garraway, let's hear what you have to contribute to this.
Well, okay, let me just say I was in the insurance agents in the realm of insurance services from the year 2001 to about 2013. I managed with British American from 2004 to 2010, and with Sagicor from 2010 to 2013. So I can tell you on the field out there that most people are not properly prepared for retirement. Mm-hmm. Sad to say. And I think it's part of the religious mindset that God will take care of me, and not understanding that God will take care of you, yes, but with your cooperation and your partnership. And that's something you had to really deal with people. That people would be fight against things like insurance, thinking, well, if I died, Lord will take care of my wife. But you have to understand you have a responsibility to take care of your family. He doesn't take care of his family. He's worse than an infidel and has denied the faith. As far as the Jewish mindset is concerned, they don't believe in retirement. But because of the world in which we live in today, most places you are put out of the job. And unless you are, of course, you are the owner of the business after a certain age, because they want greater youth, they want youth vitality, etc. Now, one of the things we learned in the insurance industry is, like, for instance, you must start as quickly as possible, as early as possible. What I think they found is if you start putting aside a certain amount of money from age 20 to 35 and don't put another cent in, you will actually have more money for those 15 years, presuming the same rate of growth than if you started at 35 to age 65. So you have saved for 15 years of saving and leaving it. You will actually end up with more money, presuming the same rate, than if you save for the 30 years starting later on, because it's principal by rate by time. And therefore, there are more money you're able to put aside. It's important. Now, one of the things we learn as we go high into the insurance level is that don't just trust in any one particular mechanism to preserve you. The Bible does speak about multiple sources of income. And therefore, those of us who went up there, we understood you had to consider things like your NIS, your pension plan. Also, what were the other assets that you had developed? Did you develop things like rentals? Did you have people working for you, maybe driving cars and bringing money for you? Do you have credit unions that are paying dividends? Do you have equities that pay dividends? Do you have bank accounts that pays interest, etc.? And therefore, what we talk about was an arsenal of economic response, and it's to make sure and take care of you. And of course, if you can get health insurance from as early as possible and able to stay in as long as possible, that is, of course, important, because the natural process for most people is that as they grow older, they will tend to have more need for medical realities, medical checkups, medical for drugs and whatever it is have you. And therefore it's an important thing to start to sit down with somebody and if you can't do it yourself, because one of the things we learn again in the insurance industry, they said only about 12 to 22% of people can self-structure. All right, so which means that means there's between 78% of people or more, all right, who actually need somebody to sit down with them and think through what the needs are that they're going to have economically. Because not, one of the things we learned again too is that you tend to spend more money when you're on holiday. Guess what? When you're in retirement, you're almost on a permanent holiday. And therefore, there's a tremendous need for you to have more resources, and you need to be able to do things to protect yourself. A lot of people, what we found out, they were depending upon things like when they leave their job, the government will pay them a large lump sum. But then we also found out that the life of the roof that on their house is 20, 30 years. And immediately when they get that lump sum, it goes into the roof. You find out that you have to really start asking yourself some serious questions. What type of retirement do you want to have? If you're looking at the history of your family, did your family tend to have certain diseases and sicknesses? I'm not calling it upon anybody, but are you going to have a tendency to have to deal with any particular type of diseases as you grow older and start making some preparation for those things? So while, yes, you buffer your health area, you also, the Bible says, wisdom is a defense and money is a defense. And therefore, you want to use money in your old age to keep, to do all those things that my other friends spoke about. You can enjoy your life, go on cruises, do anything you want to do, go visit family, especially if you have children across the globe and family across the globe. But you also want to be able to not have to be begging your children. It's a very sad thing when you go by older folks and everything they're hinting at is leave me some money, leave me some money. I had that experience once with an older relative, and that was not I was really kind of shocked, and etc. So this is extremely important to tell people, do this as soon as possible. And if you don't know how to do it, find a financial advisor who can do it, or find a pastor. If you know me, call me. I might be able to help you if you live in Trinidad. All right? At least be able to point you in the general direction of things that you need to look for. And that's important. And for me, because I brought a woman from another country, from another part of the world, I had to make sure and plan for two. So I have to make sure that normally we men tend to leave planet Earth and go off to heaven a little before the wives. We need to make sure they're taken care of. You understand? And not left struggling. I know one of the tough conversations you have that I've had with senior pastors, especially as they get older, but what are you leaving for your wife? Because what happens as soon as the man dies, the church no longer sees her as the pastor wife, and she is in trauma if that man did not prepare himself, did not prepare themselves properly for her to be taken care of. God bless you. I'll stop there.
Wow. All three of you gave us some rich, power-packed responses to this question. And I really appreciated that you went beyond the financial, because as Pastor Diaz says, we think retirement, we think finance, but there's more to it than just the finance, right? Pastor Diaz talked about those social connections, reconnecting, at least within 5 years of retirement, reconnecting with friends and family members who you haven't really stayed in close contact with as you was busy working and living your life, right? Those social connections will certainly combat one of the things that really plague the elderly, and that's loneliness. When they retire and their friends and close relatives are dying and they have no one else to connect with, that loneliness tend to be a major downer for them, and having that emotional support is very important. Dr. Jones added to his discussion the mental preparedness, keeping your mind active and busy and continuing to learn and get engaged in things, in activities that could help keep your mind sharp. And then Bishop Garraway also added to that, getting involved with your estate planning, making sure you have someone who would help you do the planning so that you are holistically ready for retirement. Just to add a couple more things to that, health and wellness. As we age, our health and wellness tend to deteriorate, but we need to also plan to stay physically active and physically engaged so that our bodies can continue to work and support us as we live longer. We tend to live a little longer these days. And the other part that Dr. Gary also added travel and leisure time, and yes, he referred to it as permanent travel, permanent leisure time. But you may even want to plan to do some traveling, right, as you retire, so that you keep involved and excited for life, because there's still another phase of your life that you will be living out. And it's not uncommon for us as we age to engage in skill development, learn something new, something fun, something exciting, something interesting, because that also keeps our mind active and engaged. So thank you so much for the wonderful responses to this question. I am going to check the chat to see if no one has placed a question or comment, but I want to remind the audience to place questions and comments in the chat so we can address those.
Yeah. Doc, can I say something here?
Yes.
It's in response to what you said just now, and I had that in my mind mentally, and it has to do with health.
Mm-hmm.
You might be fairly healthy before you get a certain age.
Right.
But as you get older, your body is susceptible to diseases,
yes,
to problems. And let me tell you, if you want to get insurance at a certain age, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
You might be able to get the insurance, but the price that you have to pay can make it very prohibitive. So that's why, as you said, we need to care our bodies as much as we could. Because as we get older, our bodies get weaker. And you might be the best vegetarian in the world, the healthiest vegetarian, but your body, is going to, because you're going out, so you ought to keep, your body fit as possible.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Comment in the chat from Pastor Griffith: the correct education as early as possible is critical to planning for our retirement years. I'm not certain that we are getting that, and I guess because we tend to not want to talk about aging, retirement, and all that, it's one of those things that we neglect. So the correct education is as early as possible is also very important.
If I may,
Yes.
if I may add to something Dr. Burchin was just talking about in terms of health.
Mm-hmm.
Now, emotional wellness is crucial to head into retirement, emotional wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes care of a huge portion of our health, our physical health, if we are emotionally well. And for emotional wellness to take place, we have to consider, and a lot of people don't, if you have Alzheimer's in your family, you need to start looking at how you're going to deal with that emotional wellness, making sure that you transition well. Because when your body starts to deteriorate, you'd be surprised to know if we're not emotionally well, it is going to impact us negatively even more than if we were, emotionally well. So let's consider that, and let's treat with emotional wellness. Our brains cannot function in cognitive dissonance.
Mm-hmm.
It can't function properly. It wants to get back to equilibrium very early. And I'm saying this to say that when it is in disequilibrium, it's going to throw us off our game. So if we have issues and challenges and unresolved conflict, we need to get that sorted out long before we move into retirement, especially if we know that there is Alzheimer's in the family. So that's just a bit of food for thought.
That's a great food for thought. Excellent food for thought, actually, Pastor Diaz, because I used to think that Alzheimer's happened, in the late 70s, 80s, 90s. But I met a young woman recently in her 50s who was in full-blown Alzheimer's. How do you prepare for that? But I'm willing to guess that it's probably part of her family, in the family, in the DNA, but that's a sad state of affairs to be that young and having to deal with that. So you're right. If that's part of your family DNA, you have to plan for that very early.
Yes, and deal with the stressors. Deal with the stressors.
Mm-hmm.
In 2012, I did some research on stress, and at that time, when I was looking at stress, they said stress by 2020 would be the number 2 killer. And I looked at it, but I kind of dismissed it. But I've lived to see that it is a fact, because every other thing that we are ailing from has a bit of stress to it. And so we have to deal. Conflict resolution has now heightened. A lot of people now looking at emotional intelligence and conflict resolution. But it has a lot to do with unresolved conflict. If we don't resolve it, emotion is an energy. And if we don't resolve it, we are taking all this stress into retirement age, not dealing with it before, and it is going to cause us some serious health issues.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to question number 2. We're off to an awesome start. Thank you, panelists. All right, at what stage in life should you aim to clear credit card debt? I know Dr. Jones alluded to that a little earlier. Is it acceptable to carry debt into retirement? And if so, what advice would you offer to our audience today? Dr. Jones, I'm going to start with you.
Certainly, Professor Ned. Now, that question, if it's advisable to carry debt into your retirement years, well, I guess most people say no, but I think it depends on you. It depends on the type of debt you have and if it's manageable debt. Now, if you have unmanageable debt and you're not really sure how you're going to pay these cards off, I would say strictly no. But the reality is that we live in a world now where we have to have debt because we have to buy things. But if you have debt that you can manage, and especially if you have a business where you can clear it off and the business is going all right, that's fine. But if you had to be, taking a bit here and a bit there and then barely, it's going to be very hard. And credit card debt is a debt that is one of the highest forms of debt. So you really don't want to be playing with credit card debt because, if you don't pay it, when the month comes, it's going up, it's going up astronomically, So, yes and no. Yes, if you can manage it, but no, if it's unmanageable. But the reality is that we even though we're retired, we still want to buy things, and we're going to need the credit cards at some point in time or the other, especially if you travel. Credit cards is a regular thing though. But for me personally, and I'm talking about me personally, whenever I draw down on my card, I try to pay it off immediately. I don't want those interest charges. It's white collar criminality, man. They're extremely, extremely high. So it all depends on the person.
Thank you. Dr. Garraway?
Yeah, when it comes to debt, as much as possible, there's what you call good debt and bad debt. Credit card, most of the times it tends to be considered a bad debt because of the fact of how it tends to be used for more consumer items, etc. But I agree with Dr. Jones. Where I hope I called his name correctly.
It's
Where,
like,
where he
sorry.
said it has to do with the individual. You know, if you're in a strong position and you can pay it off, etc., then you can use it, etc. You know, I don't want to make people feel as though they have sinned because they sometimes some people preach as though you sin when you have debt, etc. And I won't say that. Once you can't make the payments, etc., then you're putting yourself in a really stressful position. Um, you know, that's what I say about that the debt position. Now, one of the things about it in terms of preparing for for how was it old age or retirement is the only difference between assets and possessions. I call them assets versus possessions. What happens? You have a lot of things sometimes in your life that don't pay you any money for owning it. It just is a cost. And you have to be careful about those things. And sometimes people, what they do, they got a lot of things that cost them things rather than pay them things. You understand? So you can have 4 cars, and then all the 4 cars are sitting on your garage, and it's a cost to you. Now, if you're buying taxis, however, and you're putting them on the road and you're getting people to work them for you, and it's bringing in more money than you're putting out, then it's an asset. Right? And no simple accounting tells you, you know, what you own is your asset, what you owe is your liabilities. But I want to think about an asset from the standpoint of that which brings income in. And I think more and more we need to look at that standpoint. So in my life, I believe very heavy. I believe in the tithe, but I also believe in a personal keeping at least 10%. So you give 10%, you give at least 10% to God, you save at least 10%. In fact, Joseph actually talked about saving 20%. You understand? Especially when you know crises are coming. Crisis coming. Let me just say this: a lot of financial advisors also tell you that you're going to have to live on 80% of the income. They tell you, I'm not doing that. I'm trying to actually, in my mind, I'm aiming for 200% because I remember when bread was 17 cents. You know, now bread is about $17. You know, and if you live long enough, you'll be shocked where prices are going. So we need to also compensate for those kind of things. So while you may not need money to travel on a day-to-day basis, you may not have to carry lunch to work or purchase at work or whatever it is like that. Yet you're going to find that the fact that you're not on the job and therefore you're not getting increases, even though a lot of people working is still not getting increases. So you need to prepare yourself for a future. You know, one of the things I noticed in my country is that you tend to see a disappearance of older people. You don't see them at all until the first of the month when you go to the bank or the second. And then one guy was when I was teaching about this, and the guy said, well, if you really want to see them, come on the 30th, the last day of the month in the post office. You know, that's when the people were getting their checks. Then I think they're trying more and more now to send it straight to the bank. But because people are living hand to mouth, and that's a real important thing to prepare now. Take the burn now. You understand? Take the burn now that you can have a much more comfortable age that you could flourish in the time of maturity. As I said, again, if you're not having a happier older age, that one of the things that will actually keep people away from you. You can actually push people away from you because you know you're constantly complaining about money, complaining about all sorts of different things, and therefore people would want to be around you, and you have to be very, very careful concerning that. So that's up for now.
All right, thank you. Pastor Diaz?
Yes. We are discussing a very serious topic. And quite of what we are discussing will more or less be the ideal situations. But let's face it, we are not all, and not everybody is living under ideal conditions. So some people are literally actually struggling with this. So just to put out on the table, my personal belief is that by age 50, we should have begun to clear outstanding debts. We should have begun to clear it with a mindset that, hey, I would like to go into retirement debt free. But not everybody could afford to do that. So, to cushion where we are, moving it away from the ideal, I do agree that the credit card is not one of the things that we should allow to accumulate there's an interest rate of over 23%. If we have to make debt, I think the easiest place, if we can, is to join a credit union, because the credit union rates are so much cheaper, so much more people friendly, so that if at this time after age 50 you have no choice but to have that, well then see if you can go the way of the credit union, because with the credit union what happens is that you keep your principal, and you could borrow on your principal, and it's easier for you to pay off the loans without touching that principal, and that principal is also insured, so that it's it's easier for persons who may be struggling to live a bit more comfortably, knowing that they have access. And now the credit union is allowing, I think you could get up to age 70 or 75 or something around that time with coverage, with insurance coverage. So that would be my suggestion. Yes, we should try to start by age 50, but that may be ideal. But if it is we have to, let's not go the credit card way. Use the credit card exactly as Dr. Bertram said. You use it, you pay it off. You don't let it go into that 45-day cycle, because then it's a 23%. If you need to borrow, if you need to have a debt, then try and see if you could align yourself with a credit union that could assist you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Diaz. So the consensus is that you try to pay those credit cards debts off as quickly as possible, and try not to go into retirement with debt. However, there's also that underlying factor that even though that's ideal, it is possible that some of us may go into retirement with a debt. If that is the case, can you provide at least one suggestion on how our audience can attack that debt, how they can address that debt to help at least pay it down or get it to a manageable state, so that when they are on a fixed income, it does not cause them to be financially burdened or stressed? And I'm going to
for me, consolidation is something that they should consider. And with that consolidation, if that consolidation is taken via a credit union, the rates would be much less, so that it gives a lot of flex to whatever funds that the individual may have.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Diaz. Consolidation. I remember I used to work at a credit union, and that was a regular thing. The members would be debt colleagues on consolidation all the time, debt consolidation. But you know, and I'm not knocking what you said, Dr. Diaz, because what you said is perfectly correct. But you know, in a year or two, same folks are going to come back and get another loan because of the harshness of the times.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
It's very tough. I mean, you need to get things, you need to buy.
Yeah.
But I agree that the credit union might be the better way to get the financing. I'm not sure if it's a cheaper source of finance, but certainly is more people friendly. I'm talking about in Barbados. I'm not sure if it's cheaper, but definitely people friendly. You know, but we need to, in terms of investing, unless you're into business, credit card is not the way to go. You got to be in the business that you can pay off immediately. But you know, wherever possible. But you know, as we were saying, as Dr. Diaz was saying, we live in reality. Some people will have to, you know, use whatever source they can get of financing, and credit card is quicker. But if you can find your way possible, try to clear bit by bit, clear that card off, because you don't want to get into the cycle of debt crushing you, because that is a cycle where you're not free. When you are tied down to debt, you've lost your freedom. So we don't want to be in that position.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I'm in the chat. Pastor Griffin said the credit is like paying a holy man. You are his, okay. You are his slave. Okay, got you. Got you, Pastor Griffin.
Oy, oy, oy.
Oh, thank you for that levity. All right, we're gonna move on to question number 3. And by the way, Val, thank you for the summary statements that you plugged into the chat. Thank you so much for summarizing the comments made. All right, question number 3. Could you provide an overview of the different methods for transferring wealth to beneficiaries, and which one you consider to be the most effective? Bishop Gary, I'm going to come to you first this time.
I'm not certain whether this is inter jurisdiction, because we have different rules and different laws, etc., in different parts of the world. So there's some things that I keep hearing talk about in America, living trust. So things that some things we don't have in Trinidad established. So I think depends on an individual. What I do when I was in the insurance industry, we had a simple system called Barmaid. But we look at your business, your age, your residence, your mortgage, your marriage status, your avocation, different things. We look at where you were planning to go, etc. Now, as far as dispensing with your a lot of people are afraid of wills. They think wills will kill them. Right?
Yes.
And I tell people that is done. So I wrote my first will. I wrote as 29. That was 30 years ago, and I'm still alive. Praise God, right? And, as soon as you have assets, you need to think about it. Unless, of course, intestacy will solve your scenario, and you believe that is deal with it, which is, according to, again, each jurisdiction, the rules may be different to what happens if you die without a will, etc. But a will allows for careful dispensing of your asset base, etc. And in America, they tend to have a lot more sophisticated things. So it depends on, again, your jurisdiction, again, to what the laws are in Grenada and Barbados, etc. But in Trinidad, there was some things that we could do straight from the insurance policy. If you were leaving money for children, you had to delineate a trustee, somebody who would take care of that money if the child was not at a majority age of 18. So again, that's where you have to sit down and figure out, what monies you have, you want to send in what direction, as far as that is concerned. Let me just say this too. All right, something I don't know if you want to share it. But what about, I'm a pastor, but I to my church, what about 11 different sources of income? In a sense, so what you do is that you develop multiple sources of income in your life, so that you can put the problem. So not just coming up. When you understand the economic reality that is coming your way as an individual, you want to take your strongest days to prepare for your weakest days. All right, let the old you, let the young you be a friend of the old you. All right, that's extremely important to understand. And so that you can have investment that mature and then buy property and just leave it there. And sometimes you could just cash them out when you reach a maturity age. Different things you do. You have to figure out different strategies. And that's why I'm saying sometimes if you haven't been trained in the financial arena, you might need to sit down with an advisor. Of course, sometimes some insurance advisors, all they do is try to sell you their policies. But sometimes what you might need to do, if you have a pastor or somebody who is cognizant in this arena, sit down and have a little discussion with them. I've sat down with believers, and I tell them, when I'm involved in the industry or not, I may not know I may not be accurate with all the policies they have today, but I can, give you some basic guidelines and some directions, etc. Because you need to make those preparations. All right. And a will is not a very hard thing to do in our jurisdiction. All right, you don't even need a lawyer to do a will. All right, once you write it and then you sign it in a particular way, and you have two witnesses, and they are not a beneficiary, the law is simple. In our jurisdiction, Trinidad. So the thing is that you need to make preparation in this particular arena. All right, you need to, and 5 years and 10 years before you're ready to retire is not good. You understand? I started preparing for my retirement, and I think I was late at 35. You understand? But then, I'm an accounting background and all those kind of things like that too, and then went into the insurance industry. So I started preparing myself 20-something years ago. All right. As I said, so the quicker you do it, because preparing for retirement is like turning a cruise ship. You can't do it on a button. All right, you can't do it on a button. You need a mile or something to make that turn, etc. And prepare yourself accordingly. And then also too, you have to know the nature of your family. Some people have precious children who may not necessarily be a blessing to them when they get old, so they have to even protect themselves from them. I'm sorry to say that, but elder abuse is a serious thing.
Very serious.
Society, and the people who abuse these people, you'll be surprised who they are. And therefore, you need to protect yourself. If you get Alzheimer's or something, so it's only God to help you and the mercies of the people around you. But let's put that aside. You understand? If you don't have the economic wherewithal to protect yourself, then you are in greater difficulty. So, yes, relationship with God, prepare your soul for the Lord, have a good network of people around you, and be involved, get involved, association of responsible people, or more involved in the church activity, etc. Different things by which you could contribute and feel a sense of significance, etc. But then also prepare yourself economically as much as you can. I remember once meeting a guy in the radio, and he said, Bishop, he says, I've reached retirement age and I have absolutely nothing planned. I don't know what to do. And then I said, okay. And I went and I prayed. And then the Lord just told me, tell him where is he living? Oh, he's living in a certain area. He can sell his house and then move down to a smaller arena and use the difference to take care of himself. Sometimes you need somebody who could see things from another standpoint. So he was not in a total crisis. You understand? If he's able to execute that, all right? Well, famous in our country, strange enough, but you'll be surprised who has not made a plan, etc., because they just didn't see 6 day coming. And the thing is, I still remember the first day going to kindergarten, and that 6 day 59 came so quick. God bless.
Thank you. Pastor Diaz?
Okay. I don't want us to be so far removed from the more lowly publics. All right? I have been a credit union president for a number of years, and I have seen the struggle that the general average person has with saving, utilizing their savings, with investments. We've seen it. And I think the credit union has done a really yeoman service. So one of the things that can be done is that there is now to leave something for an inheritance. I think the credit union is a great place to go, because even if there is a loan, the loan is insured, it is wiped out, and the shares can go to the beneficiary, whoever the person has left it for. So that's something that can be considered in addition to all that Bishop Garraway has added. I think when we think of the lowliness, because some people may not have 2 or 3 properties, some people may not have all these various things that we could do, but within their reach, the credit union is reachable. and they could put funds in there, start putting funds in there, and even if they take a loan, the loan is secured, the money is safe for the person who they want to leave it for. So that's just another area, just to add in addition to what he has shared.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you, Bishop Jones. I'm
Yes.
sorry, I'm calling you a bishop
All
now.
right.
Dr. Jones?
Yes. All right. Again, I agree with everyone.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that in terms of the questions asked, what are the different methods
Yes.
of transferring wealth to beneficiaries?
Beneficiaries.
No, all of us don't really have a lot of cash or a lot of means.
Mhm.
So for the person who has means, who has wealth, yes, as the bishop was saying, the Bishop Garvey, there are financial advisors out there, there are brokerage firms, in the American system, there's so many different ways you can transfer money. You need an advisor. But now I'm going to deal with just the ordinary person who may have, a land or a house.
Mhm.
How does he go about transferring to his beneficiaries? And that is where the will comes in.
Mhm.
And that is what a lot of us, we don't have a will. And when you don't have a will, you're going to have, your progeny are going to have a lot of problems. It's important that we have a will and we do it now we're living, because we can't do it when we're dead.
No.
And even when you have a will, you can still have problems. So it's better that we do it now and decide who we're going to leave what for, than to let after we go them to scramble and have a lot of problems. Because when it comes to money, you see how people really are. And even, you don't want your children to suffer. But, that's what you need to do it now. But the thing is, there are some children, as the bishop was saying, who may not be God-fearing. So what do you do with them? I mean, you still got to leave something for them. But when you are living, you can decide, what you're gonna do. I would tell you, when my dad died, he died intestate, didn't have a will. And let me tell you, it was so much problems with somebody folks that, and I would like to see that happen to nobody at all, So it's best that you put, as the Bible says, put your house in order.
Yeah.
So that you leave less problems and less complications for those who come after you. There's something else I want to say too, but you go ahead.
May I add? Obviously, I believe very strongly in the credit union. I actually grew up outside credit union since I was about 2 years old. My mother was one of the founders of Teachers Credit Union. My first job was at the Teachers Credit Union. My brother was also on the board of Tateco Credit Union. So I grew up a lot and I used the credit union. In fact, when I was involved in the insurance industry, my agency had more credit union business than probably all the other agencies put together. So I very much believe in the credit union, etc. But I think sometimes we underestimate the fact of teaching. And there is a script here that actually says, if you don't know how to handle money, who will give you true riches? Where Jesus spoke about it in Luke chapter 16 and verse 11, I think it is. And therefore, I think it's imperative that we pastors educate our people, or cause them to be educated in the area of finances, every area. They need to understand the strong points of the credit unions. Everything has strengths and weaknesses. There are strengths in the insurance industry. There are weaknesses in the insurance industry. There are strengths in the working with the bank, every aspect of it, etc. So the more pieces of the more there's a term that is now slipping me, but the whole idea of having duplicate and triplicate of the same thing, it's better, because if one fails you, remember when that crushing that happened with CL Financial back in 2009, and the kind of difficulty that created. I know of the islands, they still, I think, still working on it, etc. And therefore, you need to have a redundancy when it comes to investing, etc., to protect yourself as well as to protect family, etc. And the credit union, again, as I said, I grew up in a credit union house. My mother built a house for the credit union and all that. So I don't feel I'm involved in that, and I have a lot of money in the credit union industry. And I think it's a very, very good thing. So we need to have as many different layers of understanding etc. When I was a young agent, we talked so much about just having a pension plan. When I got into management, the discussion changed. You understand? And what we realized was, you don't, the Bible talks about don't trust in uncertain riches. And therefore, we're not sure where the next attack is coming from. And therefore, we need to have diversity in terms of what, as much as possible, that will supply us as we get into the older age, etc. All right, so God bless.
I want to say something here, Dr. Ness.
Yes, go ahead.
It's something that was on my mind, and I want to bring it out. Now, this is not a mandate, but as I was reading a book today called The Retirement Years, it brought home forcefully the need that every Christian might want to consider.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a mandate, it's not a biblical commandment. I believe that everyone, we who follow Christ and are called to be his children, we believe that everything we have belongs to God. I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. But he's given us stewardship over them, and he's asked us to handle them for his glory.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to say something that might be controversial. I personally believe that before you die and you make your will, you should leave something for the cause of God.
Mm-hmm.
That may not find resonance with everyone, right? But if you believe that God owns everything, he owns everything, and he just gave it to you to manage for him, I believe you would consider, in your will, leaving something for his glory. I'm not saying give it to your pastor, but your organization,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's my belief.
Thank you all. So the question was, how do you transfer your wealth to your beneficiaries?
Okay.
And you all agree that this could be accomplished in a variety of methods. The concept of having a will was explored, which is a legal document that simply outlines how you would like your assets to be distributed upon your death. And for each of them, there are pros and cons, right? Then there's the trust, irrevocable trusts, another legal arrangement that's managed by a trustee. Someone also mentioned if you have insurances and the importance of making sure that your beneficiaries are designated to those insurance companies. But also, you may also want to consider having beneficiaries designated if you have bank accounts that have money in them. I don't know if everyone is aware that you can designate beneficiaries for your bank accounts and retirement accounts and things like that, not just life insurance policies. Some people tend to give gifts prior to leaving this earth. When they reach a certain age, they decide, okay, I'm getting up in age. I'm not going to wait until I'm gone and have my families fight over my assets. I'm going to start divesting and giving to various members of my family the gifts that I want them to have before I even pass away. And I've seen that happen. And then there's also the concept of joint ownership, especially when you have property and you have a spouse, where there's joint ownership, so that the surviving spouse has the typical rights of survivorship. And some people even have joint ownership with their children, so that again they become the surviving owner of the property, as another way of doing this. For some, they may have what is called POD, payable on death, especially with bank accounts. Again, is another way to divest that, so that when the person dies, payable upon death to the person that they designate. So these are all different ways in which we can transfer wealth to our beneficiaries. The one that legally seems to be, or that's considered to be the most effective from my knowledge, is the trust, because it's not something that could be contested. It's something that is put in place and managed by a company, and when upon the owner's death, everything is already laid out. And so again, what works for you, right? It depends on what level of wealth you have. It depends on who your beneficiaries are. We know our family members, but death tends to bring out the worst in people,
Exactly.
especially when there are assets to be shared. That's sometimes when you find out who's who and what's what and how people feel about, a lot of things. So as much as possible, get someone to guide you and to help you secure the best possible way of handling your wealth so that your beneficiaries, when that time comes, they don't spend that time in conflict, and then they have to call Pastor Diaz to come in and do mediation with them, do some conflict resolution, but they use that time to remember the joy that that family member brought into the family and to be able to celebrate the legacy left by your family members. Thank you all for your wonderful, wonderful advice on these topics. I'm going to ask you to think about your closing remarks. And while you think of your closing remarks, I just want to encourage the audience to keep coming back on Saturdays to have these conversations and to learn from our panelists information that will help you build Shatterproof Family, because we are having real talk. We're having real conversations about real life situations that would benefit you and your families as you continue to grow in Christ. Pastor Henry posted something for us. Pastor Henry, what did you want me to do with the YouTube link?
Actually, Dr. Neff, we had two programs in May of 21.
Yes.
Estate planning. So
Yes.
I'm putting the links there for if any, and we had two lawyers on that program to talk about the whole idea of estate, of our wills and so on. And so the videos are still there on YouTube. And so I've put the links for the two videos just in case you want to go on. You can copy them and then you can go on
Awesome.
and look at them. Yes. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. So if you click on them, you can get to it very quickly. All right, panelists, I'm going to come to you for your closing remarks. I'm going to have Pastor Diaz give her closing remarks.
I think this was a very healthy discussion, and I'm trusting that persons who were not able to join us would be able to review the discussions and glean and gain from them. So thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure being a part of this talk, this real talk.
Thank you, Pastor Diaz. Dr. Jones?
Yes, I would like to say the same thing too, that this discussion was enriching. And it's something that we don't really talk much about in church, at least at my church. And but it's something that we should talk about in terms of retirement and how you're going to handle yourself when it comes to retirement. I believe that, that in everything we do, we need to put Christ first. And even with how we're going to distribute our assets, even that, I think we should talk to Christ, because you mentioned earlier that you really see the worst in people when it comes to money. So even that, you need guidance from the Holy Spirit. You might think your family, but when it comes to money, you can see a different side. So yes, this is a very important topic, and it's something that I believe that we should pay heed to when we are young, so that when we get older, it's a lot easier to travel. It's unfortunate that generally speaking, we only pay heed to it when we are older. But with God's grace, all things will happen and work out well, as the Bible says. Everything works out according to His will for those who diligently trust Him. So thank you once again for inviting me on, and I pray that the program will grow from strength to strength.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Dr. Garraway?
Thank you.
What I want to say is it's okay not to know everything, and it's okay to get advice. And you don't have to take the advice, but it's good to get more information. And therefore, it's always good to hear different standpoints and different points of view. Sometimes you might even know something and then forget it. So it's always good to be, to be sharpened and to be reminded. So when it comes to these particular arenas, I think one of the most important thing is, as far off as possible, prepare yourself for the future in health, significance, and wealth. And if you do that, then I think you're going to have a much more happier pre-elevation time. That time before you go to meet the Lord personally. Those are not, you want to be able to, I would say, bring forth fruit in your old age. This is part of it, the process of planning and putting things in place. So ask, get information, receive or reject, but get the information. God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Garraway. While the Bible does not specifically address retirement in the modern sense of the term, it does offer us principles that can guide us as we approach the later stages of our life. And it talks about having a balanced approach that includes work, that includes planning, service, rest, and community. And if we continue to pay attention to those principles, and follow the guidelines that would help us plan and prepare for this stage in our life, we would certainly be able to enjoy retirement and leave a legacy for our children and our children's children. I am going to hand this over to Pastor Henry at this point in time, who will close us out. Pastor Henry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neff, and thank you very much, panelists. Greatly appreciate the contribution that you have made to the program this evening. And it's a lot to digest, but we have time. And those of you who are young, and I hope that you will start preparing very soon, or if you haven't started as yet, you will start to prepare for retirement. I will tell you one thing, is that the years do creep up on you so quickly. So quickly. I went looking this evening for that program that we did some time ago on estate planning, only to realize, when we did that, Dr. Neff, in May of 2021.
Wow.
More than 3 years ago. And so the time just go by so quickly. And trust me, I've been there. I know what it's like. Prepare earlier. The earlier you prepare, the better. Next week, God's willing, we have a very interesting topic for you. We're talking about blended family. We're doing a series on that. And we are talking about the in-laws next week, dealing with the in-laws. So plan to be with us. Bring a friend. If you're not married as yet, you better prepare yourself, because you're going to have in-laws, and you need to prepare for that. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Look forward to seeing you next week, God's willing, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you again, panelists and Dr. Neff.
Thank you all.
Have a good
Next week.
everybody.
Good night.